Today, a parking lot sits at 696 Exchange Street. The factory that once resided there torn down in the 1960s after being gutted by a fire a decade before. What if that fire never happened, and that 10-story, 200,000 square foot building was still standing today? How would the current Buffalo Fire Department manage against a monster that pushed the department to its limits back in 1954? On March 8th, 1954, what had once been Building P of the 2 million square foot Larkin Industrial Complex was ravaged by a fire that would become one of the largest in the history of the Buffalo Fire Department, resulting in its eventual demolition a decade later. But it doesn't have to be that way. Honestly, when you look at it, there isn't much you need to change to save Building P from its fate. The Larkin Company closed on in 1941. Now, if you know your history, you know that at the end of the year, Japan and Germany are about to commit national suicide, dragging us kicking and screaming into World War II. At the same time, they're also going to be inadvertently dragging us out of the Great Depression as we triple our GDP, just making everything we needed to kick their collective rear ends. All the Larkin Company has to do is last a few more months and let wartime mobilization give them a new lease on life. Even ignoring the amount of soap needed to keep millions of GIs clean over the next 4 years, I'm sure a 2 million square foot manufacturing complex that produced everything from dresses to furniture would be able to find a government contract or two floated their way. After the war, all those GIs now flush with cash, eager to start families, and in desperate need of things to fill their homes, are going to find a familiar company ready to sell them whatever they need, along with a lot of soap. Now, this is only a stay of execution. The Welland Canal ending Buffalo's golden age as a premier Great Lakes port, the flight of manufacturing out of New York in the 80s, or the rise of automation. Feel free to pick a cause. I just don't see a realistic way for the Larkin Company to survive much farther than its centennial. Listen, if you're looking for the alternate reality where Buffalo is still an economic powerhouse, go down the hall. It's the fourth store on the left. It's the same reality where the Bills won 4 straight Super Bowls and the NHL made the right call on Brett Hull's foot during the 1999 Stanley Cup Finals. Like the rest of the Larkin complex, Building P remains abandoned for a couple decades until the newly formed Larkin Development Group purchases it. With a triumphant return to manufacturing no longer in its future due to the building's age, it's been converted into a mixed-use residential complex featuring retail and restaurants on the ground floor and a combination of corporate suites and residential apartments on the floors above. What does that mean for the building? Interior walls and void spaces. This was originally an open floor plan construction, and even with a good contractor, you're going to have channels running the width of the building thanks to that floor construction. And if it's a cheap contractor doing all the work, well, don't be surprised to find that all the fire breaks in the structure have been rendered functionally useless by improperly sealed holes cut in them for electrical, water, and gas lines. Regardless, it's a building you're going to want blueprints and inspections for, and maybe even a walkthrough once it's done if the owners will allow it. Now that we have the building set, let's see if things have changed for the BFD. This was listed as in service back in 1954. And here's what's happened in the last 70 years. Not a pretty picture. 16 engine companies and 7 ladder companies closed outright, and another engine company closed the Staff Rescue 1. Additionally, 4 battalion chiefs have been eliminated in the reshuffling, and personnel-wise it's not much better. From a peak of nearly 1,500 total personnel to a little under 800, of which only 125 are actually frontline duty staff on duty at any one time. But hey, this has still got the boat. On the plus side, while you have fewer apparatus, they've gotten a little bigger in the last 70 years. Remember that 1944 Buffalo Fire apparatus pumper that Engine 32 was using back in the 1950s? 20 feet long, 750 gallons per minute fire pump, and a 250-gallon water tank? Well, here's the current Engine 32, a 2011 American LaFrance Eagle. Over 30 feet long, 10 feet high, and coming in at a whopping 45,000 pounds fully loaded. Powering this behemoth is a 515 horsepower Detroit diesel, and your fire pump, rated at 1,500 gallons per minute at standard operating pressures, is fed by a 750-gallon water tank. When that's not enough water, you have 800 feet of 5-inch supply line and 1,500 feet of 2.5-inch hose line on the back to connect to the nearest hydrant. Your present-day firefighter is also better equipped than their 1950s counterpart. Rubberized fabric coats and boots have been replaced with Nomex, capable of standing temperatures of over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Self-contained breathing apparatus now comes standard issue, letting us operating the buildings longer, and thermal imaging cameras allow us to see through the smoke and darkness. It's no substitute for proper training, but these are tools that have allowed us to operate for far longer and far safer in far more hostile conditions compared to our 1950s counterparts. We've also updated the radios a little bit. Back in 1954, only the chiefs and commissioners had radios in their vehicles, and the only portables were a few World War II era walkie talkies provided by the radio car. Today, radios are small and inexpensive enough that every single firefighter has one on scene. On the plus side, information between the incident commander outside and the crews working inside is far better. On the other hand, though, radio discipline is a far larger problem today. Well, now that we got all the players set, let's get this fire started. We'll start with a small fire at first, the classic candle in a waste paper basket. Now, back in the 50s, this fire would have been easily handled with a water can as it struggled to spread across the rest of the room, never mind the rest of the building. But see, back then, building materials were a lot sturdier. Cabinets, tables, and chairs were all made of hardwood. Cushions were made out of cotton fabric over metal springs and feathers. It still would have burned, but at a far slower rate and given off far less heat as it did so. When the Fire Safety Research Institute conducted its study on the impact of modern furniture construction during fire progression, it found that it took over 20 minutes for a room filled with legacy furniture to reach flashover stage, where the temperature in the room was hot enough to auto-ignite everything inside. The room full of modern furniture took less than 5 minutes. You can still find the good stuff if you're looking for it, but most furniture nowadays is little more than solid gasoline. Tables and chairs are either plastic or wood pressboard, and that's just laminated wood strips and glue. That foam rubber that created so many problems back in 1954? Guess what just about every cushion on your couch, recliner, chair, ottoman, and bed are made of? Oh, and it's made from synthetic fabrics too, which are just a type of spun plastic. All that's more or less solid gasoline, and it releases 10 times the energy of legacy furniture when it burns. Even assuming the fire is detected right away, the room it starts and is going to be a raging inferno by the time Engine 32 and Ladder 5 get on scene. They're still at Seneca and Swan, but their backup's going to be coming from a lot farther away than last time. Engine 3 is now at a 601 Broadway, and joining them from the second alarm units are Engine 1 and Ladder 2 coming all the way from downtown Buffalo at 132 Ellicott Street. Rounding out the rest of the first alarm is Rescue 1 over at the big house on 1229 Jefferson, and Ladder 15 coming from 1512 Clinton, along with Battalion Chief B43. Ladder 15 is the FAST, or Firefighter Assistance and Search Team. Their only assignment on the fairgrounds is going to be to rescue any firefighters that get into trouble. That said, this should still be a very manageable fire, at least as long as the first arriving officers are smart about their hose selection. Yes, I know Buffalo uses inch and three-quarter pre-connects now, but those are only 200 feet, and if the fire's in the same spot it was back in 1954 on the third floor, you don't have enough hose to reach the fire from those. It's going to have to be 2.5 again, either as part of the high-rise pack if the building still has its standpipe system, or off the back of the hose bed if it doesn't. It might be a pain getting into position depending on what you have to do, but with that much water, I bet on the BFD getting the fire out within 10 to 15 minutes, with maybe another hour or so for overhaul, as long as there's nothing unexpected. But where'd the fun that be, though? Let's pretend the building's still undergoing renovations like it was in 54. Or maybe just shoddy contractor work that's left a maze of void spaces for the fire to grow unseen in the ceiling, or maybe even jump floors. Let's have B43, the incident commander at this point, call for the second alarm. Engine 35 is going to be joining Ladder 15 from Clinton, along with Engine 25 and Ladder 10 over at 1731 Seneca. Truck 6 out of Jefferson and Engine 2 out of 376 Virginia are also going to be joining them. There's a good chance Ladder 15 is going to be pulled off of fast and sent into structure at this point, and either Ladder 10 or Truck 6 are going to be replacing them, depending on who gets on scene first. At this point, the only company left in the southern part of the city is Engine 4. Once in the heart of downtown Buffalo, they've since been exiled to 939 Abbott Road, deep in the heart of South Buffalo. Of course, the BFD will start moving other companies to fill the gaps, but that's still going to take time to get those rigs in place, and a lot of those same companies are also part of the third alarm. We've also got a lot of brass coming. Besides the 6th Battalion Chief and B56, who's the Andre Division Chief, you also have the Battalion Safety Chief, B41, the Chief of Training, B42, and B55, who's the Chief of Special Operations. You also have F20, the Lieutenant in charge of EMS, coming to the scene as well. And yes, these are all necessary and not just because an FPA says they are. Besides helping the incident commander maintain a sane span of control and not overloading them, it's about having additional pairs of eyes for each side of the building and everything going on inside. Remember, we're dealing with a 10-story, 200-foot by 100-foot building. You're going to need those eyes for looking for hazards and fire progression. Now, as long as the building is in the process of being renovated and that old freight elevator has been replaced, there's not much danger of the fire taking off like it did in 54 and taking over the entire building. That doesn't mean we can't jump this to a third alarm, though, or maybe even a fourth. If the building's occupied, you're going to need the manpower helping everybody evacuate, and you still have to worry about exposures. You still got those two bridges connecting the building P to the terminal and the main structure, and Carroll Street isn't getting any wider in this timeline. We're also assuming this doesn't become another surround and drown operation like in the 50s. At that point, the same water supply issues from 54 start raising their ugly heads again, and this time the high pressure system isn't around to bail us out. By the end of the 60s, the city had dug up the piping for that and turned it into razor blades. So if you're wondering where we're getting the water from, 5 words: portable ponds and pumper relays. And I'll admit that's the case for me too. I'm lucky enough to be in a department that does yearly training on drafting, and we use the river for that. We also don't have the rigs needed for a relay operation without a couple of the neighboring departments chipping in, so we had communication difficulties to the list of problems. Buffalo wouldn't have that last problem, but with all the engine companies already tied up at the scene, likely feeding the aerials, they'd have to pull at least 2 to 3 more companies to keep the ponds topped off. For your third alarm units, you've got Engine 21, the last of the units stationed at the big house on Jefferson, Engine 22 at 1528 Broadway, and Engine 37 and Truck 4. Joining them would be Ladder 14, one half of the East Side Express located at 2044 Bailey. At this point, over half the engine companies in the city of Buffalo and 3/4 of the ladder companies are tied up at the fire. If we had the fourth alarm units, Engine 19 at 209 Forest, Engine 38 at 398 Linden, Engine 33 at 1720 Fillmore, and either Truck 7 or Truck 13, depending on which one's available, they'll leave the city with 8 engine companies and 1 trunk company for the entire rest of the city. Actually, 7 engine companies since Engine 20 is the cotter. Additionally, the 3 corner companies, Engine 4, Engine 26 at 707 Tonawanda, and Engine 23 at 3226 Bailey, won't be moved unless they receive a call. That's a unofficial department policy. That's only going to leave Engine 36, which is stationed with Truck 13, Engine 34, which is stationed with Truck 7, and Engine 31, the other half of the East Side Express, and Engine 28 at 1170 Lovejoy to cover the rest of the city. Now, I don't think you'd see the same scenario as 54, where volunteer companies were covering the city. You'd still have those 3 corner houses, supplemented with manpower from Engine 94, Engine 95, and Truck 96, the 3 cities' reserve rigs. You also now have multiple paid departments bordering the city to draw from, such as the City of Lackawanna Fire Department, the City of Tonawanda Fire Department, and the Buffalo Airport. It'd be a hard couple of hours for the Buffalo Fire Department, but even with the limited manpower and apparatus, I feel like they'd be able to keep the fire under control. Even in 54, the fire grew as large as it did, largely due to a perfect storm of fire load, weather conditions, and the building's renovation status. With improved equipment, communication, and training, the modern BFD should be well equipped to handle this. Once again, I'd like to thank the Buffalo Fire Historical Society for their support in researching this fire. Without their treasure trove of newspaper clippings, photographs, dispatch audio, incident reports, and company histories, these videos wouldn't have been possible.